Perfect. And wait a few minutes. The only crappy thing is that I can't see if someone is on or not. It's the only thing I can't see. Um, but good evening, guys. Oh no, no one's on. So we'll just wait a few minutes and then we will do like the formal introductions and all of that as. Oh. All right. Hello, hello, hello. Thanks for stopping by. I appreciate your time and your sacrifice. We're going to wait a few minutes for people to come on, please. I'm going to do like what typical church folk do, like share tag. But it would help a lot if you would share this on your platform, because I think even though it is a very sensitive topic, it's a topic that we need to have. So by all means, please share. And thank you so much for coming on. I'll just wait another minute or two or so. We're doing formal introductions and then we'll get right to chatting. I think for those that are on, thank you so much. Just waiting a few minutes for people to join in before starting. But thank you, thank you, thank you. I appreciate it. Mm,
Hannah, it looked like your screen froze a little bit.
Yeah, it looks like you're frozen, Hannah.
daily basis.
Her new bun cake.
So we started
Lemon, red
with
velvet, orange
race
zest,
and social justice,
vanilla
social
bean.
justice and race relations. We've done finances, we've done the judicial system, we've done faith, we've done a variety of different topics. And this month we're talking about weed, ganja, marijuana.
Hannah, you frozen, baby. All right, so I think we're still live.
Yeah, it's the live is still going.
Do you all want to introduce yourselves?
I mean, I guess you may reintroduce us when she comes back.
Okay.
Am I back?
Yeah.
Sorry. Okay, great. So, of course, my internet started acting up once we hit go live. It wasn't acting up before. So, my apologies. Again, my name is Hannah Love of Love More People. I am the CEO and founder. We are a nonprofit organization that offers much needed services to inner city communities. And we are in phase one, where we have roundtable talks, where we discuss hot button issues and get a variety of different people to the table to actually have the uncomfortable conversations and then grow from it, right? So we've talked about social justice and race relations. We've talked about um, finances. We've talked about the law. We've talked about religion. We've talked about there's another one. We've talked about love and romance and building healthy relationships. And today we are talking about marijuana, ganja, weed, but however you want to call it, that's what we're talking about. Weed was legalized as a recreational drug in New York State this month. We also celebrated 420 this month. Um, and I figured we should talk about it, right? Especially since, and I'm going to go here because I am a woman of color and I know people of color. This drug has, or the carry of this drug, or the recreational use of this drug has put a lot of our people behind bars for like a very long period of time. Uh, Now that it's legalized, there's a lot of angst and frustration around it. Are you going to release the people that you put in prison for having a blunt? Are you going to expunge their records? What is this going to look like, right? We saw in the 1920s in Prohibition that things are illegal when America can't tax it, right? So alcohol was illegal until they figured out how to tax it. Tobacco was illegal until they figured out how to tax it. Now they figured out how to tax weed, and suddenly it's legal for recreational use, but a lot of us have been arrested for it, right? So before we go any further, I'm going to introduce our amazing panelists. I'm going to pull up all of their bios. So we are going to start with are you guys hearing me fine? Just not. Okay, perfect. Good. Some of you guys are still, so I think my internet is still being very difficult. So we'll start with Joy. Joy is African and she resides in Poughkeepsie, New York. She is Nigerian from the Yoruba tribe and identifies as Christian. In her local assembly, she serves as a youth director and the virtual content creator. She received her doctorate in pharmacy uh, from the Florida Agricultural and Mechanical University. Joy has initiated pharmacy substance dependence programs in both Miami um, and the Hudson Valley healthcare system. She's implemented primary healthcare, integrated medication management at both Miami and Hudson Valley. She's also started pharmacy education groups for veterans in Hudson Valley regarding any and all drug related topics. She started a monthly newsletter called Psycho Farm Points for quick info regarding psych medication. And for fun, Joy writes poetry and music, and she is a dope songwriter. And her most recent self-produced single, At the Same Time, is streaming on all platforms. She also arranges music and hymns and titles them Praise Prescriptions. And you can find her on all social media platforms as Dr. Joyous. So that is Joy. She is a pharmacist. Um, Juana is an African American who resides in Harlem, New York. She received her bachelor's in communication and business from the University of Albany. She is the amazing mom to a 1 pound, 26-year-old Uyghur who was given a 17 chance survival rate. He is currently 7 or 8 years old. I think all the years run into each other at this point. But he is a amazing, full of life. And when you look at him, you would never think that he was a 1 pound preemie. You would never look at him and see that. Um, she is currently forming a proposal to present to her job's corporate office to have a vending machine and an ATM on site that she has access to and would provide. And when she isn't taking care of her superhuman child, she watches dance videos because dance is life. And you can find her on Facebook as Princess Williams and I Instagram as Loving My Life as a Mommy. Don't know where she just went. Zainab. Well, no, not Zainab. Um, Samantha is an African American educator who resides in Brooklyn, New York. She is of Jamaican descent and is a non practicing Baptist. She has a bachelor's from Polytechnic University, now Tandon School of Engineering at NYU, and a master's from Steinhardt School at NYU. Samantha is a certified math teacher, teaches high school math, and is an adjunct professor at Baruch College. This girl is getting all of her bags, okay? Okay. She is a member for math at For America and the American Association of Black in Energy. She is a director for pedagogy. If I said that wrong, my apologies. For the Summer Energy Academy at Bedford Academy, sponsored by Con Edison, National Grid, and AABE. When Sam is not molding, instructing, and challenging minds, she plays with Rocky, her teddy terrier. And I think that brings us to Johanse, who is an African American chaplain who resides in White Plains, New York. He is also of Jamaican descent and is a Seventh Adventist First Elder. He played Division I football for Temple University and studied marketing. Later, he attended and graduated from Oakwood University with a bachelor's in church leadership. Johanse is the owner of an all-pro bail agency in New York State. So he is a New York State bail bondsman and the first elder of a new church plant, Danbury Community SDA. When he isn't working, he flies his drone, and you can find him on Facebook as Johanse Perry. So these are all of our panelists. And Bishop George, would you like to give like a minute or two of who you are, just so that the people know who you are? All right.
Yes, greetings. I did not, get my bio to you. I'm a native. I'm the youngest of three boys. I come from the South Bronx, 184th Street, Marion Avenue. I am the youngest of three. I am the founder of Hoop and Akeo Fellowship of Churches. I've been minister for 25 years plus. I found God in the midst of the street. I'm a ex-gang member. I'm a two-time convicted felon that has just watched clean. I'm an drug dealer and many other things. I am now the voice of the people that want to have an honest, pure relationship with God. I am the mechanism and vehicle to get you to build your relationship and not religion. I reside in North Carolina. I am the assistant to Apostle J.L. Cribb of Greater Praise Fellowship International Ministries. I'm a husband to one wife, and I have 5 children that are diverse in music and other things. I own my own company, B Major Enterprises LLC, and a nonprofit called Thugs for Life, which is a men's program from transitioning from the streets to the promise for the purpose.
Hmm.
All right.
Hmm. Hmm.
Is everything all right on your end? Huh?
It just stopped. Like I heard nothing. Like the last thing I heard George say was that he was a two-time convicted felon, and I didn't hear anything after that. So I am assuming, um,
We did hear
Do
him.
you need me to share
all
again?
right.
Did you hear me?
We did. We did.
Hmm.
All right.
Yeah, I heard you.
No, it's all right. Hold on, because I there's like everyone sounds robotic. So just let me join on my phone and see if that does the trick. So just give me like 2 seconds. Don't go anywhere. My apologies.
We're going to take a quick commercial break.
All right. So this might not be much better. Can everyone see? 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 So we're going to do this. Can everyone see me?
Yes.
Perfect. So now I'm on my phone. So let's pray that my phone does not do anything weird and wonky. So my sincere apologies. Okay. Technology can be great sometimes, but thank you for sharing your bio, George. I'm sorry that I could not hear all of it. Extremely sorry. But we're going to start with our first question. And so this goes to anyone and goes to everyone. What's marijuana? Anyone can answer.
Sure,
What's
I guess I'll
marijuana?
go. Marijuana is a plant, and it cuts the plant Cannabis sativa. That's like its official chemical name. And I believe that it was derived over like in the east part of the world, or not derived, or that's where it was originally discovered for the most part. And it has different medicinal properties, or just like any other plant, it has chemicals that may have an effect or may not have an effect on you, your body, and how it works. So, yeah, it's a plant. You are muted, Hannah, so I don't know.
Sorry, I'm using my phone, and normally I use my computer and have everything on my phone. Okay, so let's talk about some stigmas that are surrounding marijuana. So anyone can answer that based on your experience, based on what you've heard people say, based on what churches has taught, based on what your parents have taught. What are some stigmas around marijuana?
Um, a stigma that is common, at least for me, is that it's the gateway drug. Um, just like those old school commercials when they crack a egg in a frying pan and say, "This is your brain on drugs." Um, stigma is that the use of marijuana deems you unable to function. Those are some of the things that I have heard.
I know that growing up in the church, my my upbringing was in the Central States Conference of Seventh Day Adventists, and we had a annual like poetry jingle contest where we were supposed to create something to keep people off drugs. And so most of the time we associated it with like you're dumb if you smoke, or if you're dumb if you try to do all these things, it's going to make you a bum. And so I think in the context of religion, it's really been stigmatized. But as I've gotten older, I hope Hannah comes back. As I've gotten older, it has actually there's been less and less of a stigma. Back when it was more associated with African American use, it was more stigmatized. But as things went along and more of the Caucasians admitted to use, and it kind of just became something that everybody wanted to do so. I think the stigma was kind of taken away when, oh, well, not taken away, but it's a lot less of a stigma with marijuana use than there used to be.
Yeah, I totally agree. I believe that just like you know, I don't want to digress too much, but like this heroin epidemic, you know, it gets stigmatized in a certain demographic, and then when it moves to a different demographic or the demographic, it becomes like another label, like the difference between uh, I guess a mental health crisis versus a criminal crisis. So I think that's the direction that will probably be, um, yeah, we'll be going in with uh, marijuana.
Johanse, any stigmas?
Well, certainly, marijuana use is oftentimes categorized with, uneducated. Uh, you're incompetent. Marijuana is, you know, it's been criminalized over the years. So definitely that is the stigma, the main stigma, that it's been criminalized. So I mean, the smallest of blunts or joints or roach, if recovered, could have put you in jail as of 5 years ago. I mean, you get pulled over, smell of marijuana, automatically that's probable cause to search a vehicle. So that's always been over the years. And even as of, before April 1st of this year, that was the probable cause for police officers to search the vehicle. If there was marijuana smell, then, guns have been recovered, drugs have been recovered. DWI tests have been conducted, because if you're driving while high on weed, that's like alcohol. DWI is also associated with the drug and not just alcohol. So, I mean, the stigma surrounding it, possession of it, being high on it or under the influence, and also criminalization are the main stigmas surrounding marijuana right now.
Oh, I'm back. Sorry. Um, yes, these are all stigmas that we hear. It's almost as though you're immediately criminalized for admitting that this is a drug that you partake in, or you're criminalized for wanting to explore it, right? I believe Joy said it, you get the egg crack, where you're immediately uh made to feel that marijuana and crack or marijuana and cocaine are in the same boat, right? When they're two very different drugs that do two very different things to the body. Um, a lot of you all mentioned the church and how the church has conditioned a lot of this thinking. So I would love for Johanse, since you are a chaplain and an ordained recognized first elder, and George, since you are a bishop and an apostle, can you speak to that? Where do these teachings come from? Who taught us that this is a green leafy thing that we can't eat, right? Who told us that of all the drugs or of all the plants in the world, peppermint is okay, but marijuana is not? Or that thyme as a seasoning and a spice is okay, but marijuana is not? So can you both speak to that, what the church has to say about it, how the church
Well,
teaches it?
with respect to marijuana and what makes it deemed a drug and how it affects the body is that as it's grown, THC is what's formed when it is mature. So that chemical is the main chemical that allows you to get high. So once you digest or smoke Marijuana then hits your brain and then releases dopamine, and that's where the high begins. So biblically, I mean, you got to be biblically, you got to be sober, says the word. I don't never knew Jesus to preach and to teach and to heal while high. That was never in his repertoire. You from the biblical standpoint, I have to speak from my own testimony. I used to smoke a lot of marijuana, okay? In my collegiate days when I played football and when I was in college and living that life, it was so recreational. It was social. It was something that, my body and all the pain that I would go through from working out twice a day and hitting every day, playing games and this and that, my body would be in pain. And I didn't want to take painkillers because I saw my teammates get strung out on painkillers. I didn't want to revert to alcohol abuse because that in itself was an issue. But I did partake in marijuana. Had fun with it while it lasted. But I then realized when God was elevating me and calling me into the ministry, I had to put all of the substances down. I couldn't morph or develop into the man that God wanted me to be if I still held on to marijuana abuse. It's not like I just smoked it here and there. It became a crutch, and that's one issue with marijuana. I mean, some people take it differently. It affects people differently. Some can function with it, others can't. Marijuana has known, and also with alcohol abuse, to heighten any other mental illnesses that may be already existing in an individual. It definitely prevented me, it prohibited me from moving forward, in life the way I was supposed to. Since I let marijuana down and alcohol down, and it's been 12 years since I've been sober. In 12 years, I've become a business owner. 12 years, I've graduated college. I've been ordained as a deacon, ordained as an elder. Pretty soon, I may get an appointment in the Adventist church as a pastor. I mean, it's just what God wanted me to put down. I don't want to. All of my clients, 90% of them get high. I mean, it's just what it is. They come into my office and my whole office is reeking of marijuana. I can't judge them. I can't be like, yo, what are you doing? Listen, this is a child of God too. This is just what, the choice that they've made. So, it works for some and it's detrimental to others. But for my life, I got to speak from my perspective. I had to put it down in order to be where I am today and where God is still carrying me. So that's just my part. That's just my part or my perspective on marijuana. And biblically, once I put it down, God was able to operate in my life fully. So
thanks for sharing. Oh, yeah. I was going to say, George, when you're in the pulpit or when you're counseling your members or when you have a mother venting to you about her son or her daughter, what angle do you take? How do you approach it?
Well, first how I approach it, me personally, you know, it's two elements of us. It's three really, because we're trying to existence of a person, mind, body, and spirit. And when someone brings something to me like that, I do a lot of outreach. So I'm not one that you see with the collar on or in the suit and tie going about his business all holier than thou. I'm in the trenches. I'm with the drug dealers. I'm with the scribblers. I'm with the ones that's been looked over and set aside. I'm the one that's going to look for the rejected. because that's what ministry and having a relationship with God is about. I don't care. I say that at the table with the Muslims. I don't care who you are. If we could do something to impact somebody's lives, that's the perspective I always approach anything. And I do a lot of youth outreach. Like when I tell you marijuana, whether it's young or old, it's been here forever. And unfortunately for some, it's not going nowhere. And the reality is, if a mother was brings it to my table, let me just build a scenario. Say a mother comes and say, "Hey, Johnny has been getting high." The first thing I ask her, he getting high. If they start to backpedal and be like, "Well, I really don't want to get into it. You really don't want help." Now, if you tell me Johnny getting high on cocaine, it's another conversation. If you tell me he's smoking weed or reefer or like I like to say Chiba, if he's smoking that Chiba, then I'm going to ask her, has he been introduced it by your past? See, what happens a lot of times when we are in the chair of leadership, whether it's spiritually or naturally, when people bring stuff to us, they don't want to bring the whole thing to us. So we can't give them holistic help. A lot of stuff that we do as people is what we heard, seen, or been exposed to. And so the first thing I want to know, who's been smoking around John? Did you have a pot addiction? Did you have any kind of addiction? Because now we have a bigger issue because he may only be on weed for a week. He may be on weed for a month. He may be on weed for a couple of years. After a while, he's going to look for something stronger. So, I used to smoke weed. Trust me, I used to smoke weed from sun up to sundown. Not because I needed it, it's because I sold it and it enhanced the lifestyle of those that was around me. Whether it was the homies or the boo things. If this is what you wanted, I'm going to provide. So when they come to me, I go in my file cabinet called What I Survived to Tell a Story About. So, and then if they come to me and they're honest, I say, hey, are you open to me sitting down with your son or your daughter, whoever, and let's just have a real talk. Let's not do a judgmental thing. Let's find out the why. One thing about it, when with spirituality and natural things, we need to always know the facts and the why and how we're going to work it to it benefits the betterment of the person. The Bible says, "Judge not that ye be judged with the same measure, and ye without sin, let them cast the first stone." And then it's the part that I love that nobody really preaches. Let every man work out his own soul salvation with trembling and fear before the Lord. We are not to be judgmentals. We are to be helpers, because the Bible also says that love covers a multitude of sins. And if this is a weakness, let's deal with the weakness as much as we can in private. Now, if they become reprobative to it, then now we have to take other measurements to let them know that you cannot expose those around you to your issue. Did that answer your question?
No, it did. It was an excellent answer from both perspectives of two men that once smoked and felt God calling them to stop and then do his work, right? We oftentimes never speak of the individual holistically, right? We oftentimes just speak to what we're seeing, which is a symptom, right? And Joy can speak to this because she's a doctor. While you do prescribe medication to ease the symptom, it does not remove what's causing the symptom. And from what I'm hearing you say, George, there's a root issue. No one just picks up a blunt just because. There's a root issue, right? But that being said, we actually have a smoker, right, who is here and can speak to her experience and her encounter and why she started smoking to begin with. So, Kwana, before we get any further, I would love to hear your experience. I would love to hear what caused you to pick up a blunt. From the spiritual or the Christian aspect, we can spiritualize things and say it is a root issue, but for you, it might be completely different. And I know a pinch of it, but I want you to speak to it. So I would love for you to speak to why you picked up the blunt. How old were you when you picked up the first blunt? What did your first hit feel like? Why you still smoke today? All of that. Mm, are you there, Juana? Today must be the day for internets. All the internets to act up. Okay, she might be having issues. So we'll. You there, Boo? Uh-oh.
I am
There's
here.
crackling.
My connection is very bad. It keeps kicking me out. Yeah, but I can hear you. I know you were mentioning me and asking about my experience, but I didn't catch the whole question because it blanked out immediately when you said my name.
Okay, sorry. So I was saying that as Christians, we can spiritualize certain things, right? We can speak to root issues of marijuana, but that might not be your story. So, what is your story with marijuana?
Alrighty. My camera seems to be wanting to act up. I hope everyone can hear me. As she mentioned, my name is Kwana. My experience may be different or the same depending on who you are. The first time I smoked, I was 12. I know a lot of people look and it's like, wow, 12, that's barely a teenager. Why? For me, it was a choice. There was no peer pressure. There was nothing of the outside sources or forces for me where it's like, okay, this is what you're going to do. It was something in that I was curious about, something that I wanted to know and experience for myself. Now, at 12, you may have the thought process of, well, what do you really know? But you don't know until you do know. And I was literally on my 12th birthday. I'll never forget the day because it was symbolic for me. Um, August 24th.
No.
No, Oscar.
Hmm?
Yeah, she cut out. She'll
Hold,
probably have to come back. Yeah.
hold on. She's coming back.
That's what that's what happened when you're on uncharted territory helping people. This topic will help a nation, from every perspective. So chaos going to happen because, especially if you look at the culture that's doing it, this is how we strengthen our community. This is how we strengthen our people. This is how we strengthen one another. Just being free to talk and build. Go ahead, Q.
Sorry, Boo.
Hi, sorry.
There
So,
you go. Wherever you are, that's perfect.
so I'm sorry if I'm cutting anyone off. As I was saying, so it started early for me. It wasn't anything to do with the outside chores or outside influence. It was something that I personally just wanted to experience. Um, After my first time, excuse me for the light change, I'm just literally getting home from work. um, After my first experience, it was literally something that I stuck with because I enjoyed what it did for me. When I say that, I mean as me personally and my experience, um, it's a body experience for me. Ties into an emotional experience for me because it just gives me that mellow feeling, that feeling of contentment. And some people may look and think, well, do you really need a drug for contentment? And then I'm one of those people who's never actually looked at marijuana as a drug. I feel like it's a plant. It's a plant that has some alterations to it, but I feel like in a sense, a drug is something that has been chemically alterated. And so I've never actually looked at weed as a drug. I look at drugs as things as something that will give you a consequence or there will be some type of negative feedback if you decided to stop taking a drug. And being a person who's indulged in recreational marijuana for decades now at this point, and have stopped for multiple reasons. Stopped cold turkey, and once I found out that I was pregnant, cold turkey. decided I wanted to take a career path change, stop cold turkey. It's never been a time where it's like, okay, I'm not smoking. Oh my God, I can't eat. I'm angry. You're frustrated. There's no withdrawal symptoms and things like that. You feel a difference, especially with anything that you've done continuously. But that's just always been my output. So,
which now makes me want to pull on Sam because Sam is a teacher, right? Sam has taught both junior high school, and the collegiate level, right? So most people, their experience with drugs was when they were a bit older, right? 16, 17, 18, college, post. Quana was the first person I ever met in my entire life whose first pull was at the age of 12. So, and it's funny, every time I hear it, I'm just like, wow, it really was like you was a child. Okay. Right. So from my perspective, being like super safe Sally and feeling or having the understanding um from what I was taught as far as church is concerned, all drugs are bad. It doesn't matter what the drug is, unless it's prescribed by your doctor, all drugs are bad, right? So for me, it was always taboo. But to meet a real life person who was doing this from a young age, I was like, oh, well, that's interesting. Still had no desire to try it, but that's interesting. But Sam, from your perspective as an educator, right? How does a child who is smoking um, affect their ability to learn from your experience, affect their ability to process from your experience, affect how involved their parents are in their educational career. So from your perspective as a teacher, what does the smoking student look like? What is it like teaching the smoking student?
I do have a bit to say. I wanted to add on to Laquana's statement, and I'll bring it back into the perspective of students and the use of marijuana. It does look different amongst different ages, but I want to bring up the fact that Laquana is shedding light on the idea of having an addictive personality versus a controlled personality, for you to have the ability to use and not use at your choice. And I think the idea of abuse of a substance is very important, so when you consume and not indulge, there's a difference. People use that to justify their drinking habits or whatever the case is. And I also want to bring up the fact that, even when we think about other drugs, such as like cocaine, now cocaine is actually a leafy thing. It was humans who deconstruct the leaf to their indulgence, right? So now it became something that is highly addictive, but it was never meant for that use. The tribal people in Mexico, when they're having large gathering, the women would chew on the leaves to stay awake, to make these large meals for that gathering, right? So I don't think, it really, especially when I learned about that, I was like, there's a strong difference between the idea of abuse and
Mm-hmm.
overindulgence and just like usage of something in general. So, I think that that mentality is another thing that play. And I think, as mentioned before, it's not for everyone. It's not for everyone. I too admit that I actually use it recreationally, right? So, I use it just like very, very controlled. Like for me, one big thing for me is that, and yes, I'll pass the mic. I'll pass the mic. Like right after, I'll bring it to you, Joy. Um, Me personally, during the week, I'm not going to use it. I need to be able to function, especially when I'm teaching all of these grade levels and all that stuff. The weekend, I could be a bit more relaxed. It allows me to just really center myself and just come back to myself and just release all my stress, just really be about me and not worry about the everyday stressful activities, my 9 to 5 and my afterwards 5 to 9, right? Um, but as you're mentioning, like, the use for students, I do feel that, for such a thing, there should be a age before, you experiment into that substance, because I believe that, uh, a youth's brain is not as developed as, when they're older. So, your experience, Aquana, is unique, where many other experiences are a bit different, where because they're experimenting with these things at a younger age, they don't have the ability to have the control, um, uh, like when they're older, like the ability to the mentality to say not today versus you're clear for today. And I think that's an important thing as well. So like, in my middle school, yeah, I've experienced students who were in the, under the substance. And I had a year where I had a lot of overage students in middle school, and some of them were into that substance. So at that moment you could kind of see, like, based on their choices, and then also the addition to that, like they were heading in a direction. I mean, I remember one in specific, and I think she was battling like some sort of depression. We actually reached out for outside counseling throughout her year in the 8th grade. And then when you come to high school, um, again, it looks different than, especially in middle school. Middle school looks a bit more out of control. High school still looks out of control, but um, you'll have more experiences of the functioning student who are using the substance, and they're coming to class and they're still doing the work. Their attitude might just be a little bit different. So,
Mm-hmm.
the idea of dependency can still exist. And the college student who doesn't, they're a bit more discreet. They're a bit more discreet, um, I guess, they'll make sure that they do it on their own time. They're not going to come to the classroom reeking. I mean, there may be in a residual sense, if there is one, but you'll see progressively as, the older you get, the more discretion, the more control you have over the desire to be under that influence. So I hope that answers your question. And I know that Joy, you wanted to add. So
Add away.
Okay. I really appreciate the conversation so far, especially everybody being candid about their experiences. I just feel like we kind of have to talk about the the weed, like how it works, and like myths and actual facts. So I know a lot of people do start using marijuana at young ages. I grew up in Colorado, so that was definitely a thing that was everywhere even before it was legalized. But we have data that shows that using marijuana at earlier ages and in adolescence does increase risk for um, psychological effects later on. So schizophrenia, there's increased risk with that, and other things such as anxiety. And the reason for that is your body has a natural system. So there are literally things in your nervous system for cannabinoids, which are with THC and CBD. Your body is built that way, and this is a regulating system. That means that it tells your body when to calm down, it tells it when to get excited. So your body is building based on how much you have. But this is a little bit more, has more of an influence when you're younger because your body is actually building these receptors as you go. So because that also has an effect with dopamine and things like that, then that's where a lot of addiction comes from. But I do want to also talk about the aspect of a drug because it kind of depends on how you define drugs. I believe that FDA has a drug as anything with like that has an effect on your body. And so there are definitely almost everything that we use in the pharmacy started as a plant, or we created something to mimic what plants do. So cocaine, like that, it was a plant. Opium, opium is a plant. We figured out how to make oxycodone, and so there, like everything starts a lot of times based on us figuring out what this plant does for the body, and then we figure out how to extract it from wherever plants that we can, and then we figure out if we can make it in a lab, and then if we can, then we can create doses that can go for everyone. So there, I don't want to say that it's not a drug because it comes from a plant, because a lot of things that come from plants end up being drugs, and just because it's a plant doesn't mean that it's good for you. However, I also believe that marijuana or cannabinoids have their medicinal benefits. And that is why it's being legalized in many places. So marijuana originally was not legal, and then it became legal. And the reason for that has to do with a lot of racism. And so we have to be very honest about that. And then they couldn't criminalize it if it's legal. So if you think about the things that kill most Americans, that is nicotine. That's smoking cigarettes, and you can get that stopping at the gas station. And this marijuana that literally wasn't killing anybody at the time, there are things have changed. So you kind of have to wonder exactly what was going on there. They have classified it as a Schedule 1 drug, which means high potential for abuse and no medicinal benefit.
Marijuana?
It's Schedule 1. Yes, federally it is Schedule 1. It is in the same class as heroin.
Okay, so for the non-medic person like me, can you restate what that is? I know you just said it.
Oh, sorry,
Can you
okay.
restate it? Because I don't speak doctor, I speak regular
Sorry.
person.
Okay, so as far as medications or products, we have 5. Well, there's regular there's over the counter, and then the step up is prescription. And then even within prescriptions, we have controlled substances. There are different classes of controlled substances, and the worst one is Scheduled 1. Not the worst one, but the one that you can't get, like nobody can prescribe it. Scheduled 1 drugs, and that is what was created with the DEA. I believe in the 70s is when it was first classified as Scheduled 1. And its classification doesn't make sense. I mean,
I was just about to say that because I've never heard of someone so high that they killed someone. Most people that I know, when they get really high from weed, do 2 things. They either eat and go to sleep, or they sleep and they eat. I've never seen anyone so affected by marijuana that they begin to commit federal crime. So I find it very interesting that they classify it as a level 1 drug when it does not affect your body like every other level drug does.
Yes. So this was racism. And also, for money reasons, it's hard to tax something like that. And people, make it on their own. There are people who would use it as teas and things like that. And they found ways to make synthetic versions of THC that they use for cancer, that has been used for different medicinal purposes. And those cost an arm and a leg. And often, people can't afford the Marinol for their nausea, vomiting with cancer treatments, and so they'll go to something else. It can be used for weight gain and things like that. It does have psychological effects, but as far as the addictive potential, it is less addicting, or I would say, if I was to say alcohol versus marijuana, I definitely say alcohol would be the more addicting one. And by the way, so they have kind of the medications that we give for anxiety, right, are a lot of times benzodiazepines like Xanax, right? So a lot of those drugs literally come based on how alcohol works. So they work along with the same parts of the brain that alcohol does. Those are Schedule 3, meaning it's easier for you to get those in any state than it would be for you to get alcohol federally. So I do think that there's a lot of myths, and there's a lot of things that were instituted because it was a Schedule 1 drug. As far as the medical field goes, you also are limited in the research that you can do about it. So we couldn't prove what it was doing exactly because we couldn't have, if who are we going to give it to? The Schedule 1 drug, which they said had no medicinal benefit. So there is a point also where we have to realize that because it's criminalized, and because a lot of times we're targeted because, hey, I grew up in places where it was mostly not my skin color, and all of them were just high all of the time. Not all of them, most of them were high a lot of the time, and they are fine. They didn't, it ends differently for us. So for me, generally, if I'm talking about any sort of smoking weed or anything like that, it has to be in the context of, hey, is this worth you going to jail for? 'Cause you shouldn't go to jail for it, but do you want to? If you know that you can give it up, then just do what you have to do, because most of us in pharmacy school, not most of us in pharmacy school, some of us in pharmacy school, and I know medical school students and stuff who partook. But the fact we want to keep our jobs, and like she said, when she applied for her job, when she wanted to have a child, that she cuts it off. And so you have to be able to weigh what you're doing, be very smart about it. I'm never going to tell you to smoke weed, but just be aware of how it works, and also that it is a drug, like regardless of, but it definitely is natural, like naturally occurring, but so are a lot of things.
So now my question is, and anyone can answer this. What is, for the uneducated person like me, right? What is the difference between THC and CBD, right? Earlier, Johanse touched on it, and he said THC is the matured version. I don't know. I've never, so I don't know. All I know, and this is going to make me sound super duper silly. All I know is that THC turns you up and CBD calms you down. And I only know that because T is for turn up and C is for calm. So clearly I got it wrong. So teach me and the other super safe folk on here that don't know the difference between THC and CBD. So that goes for anyone who has dabbled in marijuana, Mary Jane, whatever you want to call it.
So briefly, THC is the actual chemical that gives you the high. CBD is also an extract mainly from hemp, but also marijuana plants. That in itself cannot make you high, but CBD is proven to help with epileptic seizures, and it's proven to help with pain and things of that nature. But the difference is that THC is the chemical that gives you the high, and CBD doesn't give you the high. It's not. It can't function as a high by itself. It has to be intertwined with THC in order to give you the high.
Oh.
So there are, and just to piggyback, so both of them are in the marijuana plant. And generally you're not smoking marijuana without both of those chemicals there. And most of the time, yeah, it's there. There is the system that I was kind of talking about that interacts, like that your system has these receptors that are made for the THC and the CBD. They respond to these things differently. So CBD actually helps your own body work with the systems with whatever endorphins are released by itself. THC it just acts as an endorphin. So your body kind of backs up because it thinks it's there. So THC is the psychoactive substance. And I do want to kind of circle back because we were talking about alterations that were made. So previously, before marijuana was made illegal, there were actually lower concentrations of THC in marijuana. But, as people wanted to have marijuana for the high, they started, kind of making more of the plants, or growing more of the plants that had a high content of THC. So higher contents of THC are, generally used. But if you look at the chemical structure of these, they're basically the same. They're not basically. They're pretty much the same, except for like one ring in the chemical structure. It's just broken, which makes CBD is the one with the broken ring, so it can kind of twist itself and bind differently to receptors. But yeah, so there's also different strains. So I don't know if everyone's heard about the indica and the sativa. So
that was the next question I was going to ask. So you can just segue into that. Now that you've explained the difference between THC and CBD, thank you. What are the different strains and what does it do to the body? And how are these strains created? So Quana is over there like having the time of her life. So I need you to chime in. So you all can chime in, but what are the different strains and what do they do and how are strains created?
Well, it's just a different plant basically that they use. So there's a sativa and an indica, and they grow in different parts of the world. And the sativa is more activating, so people use it for things like depression and stuff like that. The CBD is more, not the CBD. The indica is more sedating or calming, and that's the one that if you use it purely, it can help to like relieve insomnia, some pain, and things like that. But the indica has a higher concentration of CBD compared to THC. They're both in there, but the sativa has a higher concentration of THC versus CBD. So it kind of, and there's also hybrids where people put them together, but no one kind of like made them. And just to be clear too, both have medicinal properties, right? So THC, when we make it in synthetic forms, it's synthetic THC that they also use to fight seizures and things, to fight emesis. Those are the THC is still used in that way. And I want everyone to think that it's only CBD that can be used for medicinal products, but THC is more often abused than CBD would be.
Quana, chime in. Let's talk about strains.
Okay. Strains from the recreational point of view. As mentioned, you have sativa and you have indica. Of course, you have all of the different names and things that people come up with in their spare time. But sativa would be that one that would be your morning blunt or your morning spliff or however you would like to indulge. The indica would be at night. Your sativa, I mean, you don't get me wrong. It's no one to say, oh, well, you can't have a strain of indica in the morning. You can smoke with your heart's content. But as far as the growth and the plant itself, sativa plant is bigger. Like she said, it's more wider. That's more of your energy. That's your morning. You're moving around and things like that. Your indica is your nighttime, after work relaxation. Like Samantha mentioned earlier, weekend. Her downtime. It's all right for her to be down. She might like her a good strand of indica. Um, when you think of plants and strands, like she said, they literally are just different plants. One grows shorter and bushier, whereas one is a longer strand with um more of a longer stem, if you would. And that's pretty much the differences. One's a up, one's a down. One is for the energy and one is for the mellow. It balance. Just like everything else, it's pretty much all about balance.
Could I add?
Oh, yes, please.
most
I
of,
know nothing about this. Please add.
most of the time people say that sativa is the head high, while indica is the body high. So, like sativa will give you the euphoric feeling, but your body can still function. That's why most of the time people say sativa would be something that you smoke in the morning, where you can feel like,
Energized.
yeah, you still have energy to function. So chances are, if I were to guess it, most sativa, well, not most sativas, different sativas do different things, and like, in the evening, indicas give you a body high, as in it makes your body feel relaxed. So especially like if you have trouble sleeping, you're smoking, you want to lean towards something that's more indica based, because it relaxes the body, and then just you go to sleep. For hybrids are interesting. When they do that little cross pollination, that good old fashioned biology. Um, like I think, especially when, like, as Joy was mentioning, like, people want that feeling from the marijuana. So now they're doing all of these uh, hybrids, these cross pollinations, to get certain aspects from one plant and certain aspect. But that's what they do with produce. You want sweet carrots, you want large carrots. So you take those two, you do a little cross pollination, you grow, you test it out, and then you end up growing large sweet carrots, right? And also, they're also doing the biology unit at my school currently with the ninth grade. We're doing the pollination, so I'm like kind of into it. But genetics unit, sorry. But like, it really just depends on well, what is it that you want from it? What is it that you prefer? And if you're just like, I'm open to it all, then, you know, yeah, I would go with what Quana mentioned, and say, like, during certain times of the day, and, certain strains may be preferred. But if you want it all, you just have to look into the hybrids that have the overlap. There's a website called Leafly, that gives a lot of background information on strains. So before you just jump into the boat and say, I want to buy it, you be like, hold up, how about you look it up to see what are some of the effects? It gives you the positives, the negatives. It won't tell you where to get it from. It's not that legal yet. It's not that legal, but at least you can also educate yourself on it. You don't want to just jump into, the ocean. Maybe you want to investigate a little bit about the water.
I just want to comment real quick, just a fun fact. Sorry, I'm like a nerd out here. Since that CBD is also, it's not only in marijuana, it's also in echinacea and kava kava plants. So those cannabinoids are not just growing in certain places. And people use kava kava for anxiety, but it's also one of those things that has like a homeopathic effect, if you will, where CBD at lower concentrations will actually act a little bit more like THC. And as you have more CBD, then it becomes more of a calming effect. All right, I'm done.
I feel like a nerd. I'm learning all the things. So here is another question. We're going to switch gears for a little bit. And right before, Sam, what was the name of the website that you just said?
Leafly. So Leafly, I believe. I'll just double check, and I'll type it into the chat.
I just one of the viewers asked. So here is a question, right? Because this is the hot button issue that I wanted to address. Now that we understand what weed is, now that we understand how it affects the body, the different strains from both the recreational use and the medicinal use, right? The when the doctor writes a script for it versus when you ask your guy on the corner, real quick, right? We know the differences between the two. A lot of our men have been locked up. And we know that America has this beautiful tradition of criminalizing things that they can't tax and make money off of, right? So they criminalized alcohol in the 1920s, exactly 100 years ago, because they couldn't tax it. And once they figured out how to tax it, it suddenly became legal. It did not bring back all of the people that they killed who owned speakeasies or hidden underground joints that sold alcohol, right? It didn't release the person who sold the moonshine from prison after they've been arrested and has already served their time um, for a drug that is now, or a substance that is now legal. They did the same thing with tobacco a few years later. Tobacco was illegal until America figured out, hey, we can tax this, and then it suddenly became okay to use. Same thing for opium, right? This thing is illegal until we can tax it or put it on a poppy seed bagel, and now all is well. So marijuana, unfortunately, has caused a bit of a ruckus, right? We have a lot of okay. We have a lot of men that have been arrested for a blunt, right? And at one point I wanted to be an attorney, so I understood the three strikes you're out. So essentially, you are arrested for having this amount of weed on you, right? This is not a lot, right? You're arrested for having this amount on you. You may get off if you have a good judge. You may serve 30 days if you have a mean judge, right? You go home, you're cool, everything is fine. You may get arrested for having this amount again. That's two strikes for the same infraction. You get to your third strike, and now you are going to get the fullest um, you're going to get hit the hardest because this is your third time being arrested for the same thing. And now you're serving 15 or 20 years, right? So when you hear things like that, once you're a convicted felon, you are unable to return home if you live in the projects. You don't get um, food stamps. You don't get government funding to return to school, essentially putting you in this box of once a criminal, always a criminal. But now this substance that has caused a lot of our fathers, uncles, brothers, cousins, boyfriends, and best friends to be arrested is now legal. What do you feel should happen? How do you feel about that? Johanse, you've been real quiet. So for someone who um, is a bail bondsman, and for those that don't know what a bail bondsman is, you are arrested for said crime, and you have a bond. You bail. You have to post your bail. You can't afford to post your bail. You go to a bail bondsman who asks for some kind of collateral, puts up the bail for you, and you have to pay it back. Right? That's like really simple terms. So he sees both sides of the individual that's has the infraction against them, the person behind bars, and their family. So Johanse, I would love for you to speak to that as a Black man. George had an important call he had to run. Um, you two are the persons I had in mind to answer this. So how do you feel about it? What are your thoughts, your impressions, and then we'll trickle um, to everyone else that is on the call. So we'll start with you, Johanse. What are your thoughts towards its recent legalization?
So, as of April 1st of this year, that's when marijuana was legalized. But initially, it's more legalized on a personal use. I think you're only allowed up to 3 ounces personally. Um, Also, later on down the line, because the taxing of it hasn't been fully bloomed, meaning they came up with it initially, but they're now still trying to figure out how to tax it as an industry. So for um, places you can go to smoke and to purchase and whatnot, and the licenses have to be formed in order for you to distribute or to sell marijuana just like alcohol. So what I also read, it's a New York Times article, if you want to Google it, a person's going to be able to hold up to 5 pounds of marijuana in their home. Okay. They're going to be able to grow up to, I think, 5 plants in their home. So the question is now, what about all of the marijuana convictions over the years? So it's not going to be every marijuana conviction, but the petty ones deemed petty. Because in my experience, in order to obtain a felony possession of marijuana, you would have to have a pound or more to have a felony case to be prosecuted by the district attorney as a felony in possession of marijuana. So
really quick, for those that don't understand sizing, right? Because we're hearing a pound and we don't fully understand what that means. When you go to the Jamaican restaurant and you get a manager's special, that's a pound. Like, I'm going to put it into very practical terms because I don't have a scale in front of me. But if you go to Golden Crust and you get a manager's special and then pack up this styrofoam container, that is a pound of marijuana. You are getting federal time for that. You are not getting federal time for the blunt that one is smoking as we speak. See the difference?
Well, you wouldn't get federal time for a pound. I mean, you'll get federal time for hundreds of pounds of marijuana. But to really look at it, that's how they're going to break it down when it comes to expungement, because you got to see who was trafficking, you got to see who was mainly personal use, you got to see who was caught with what, this and that. I mean, that's how they're going to determine how they're going to expunge the records regarding marijuana. But just know not every marijuana charge or conviction is going to be overturned. And it has to all to do with how you were involved with the marijuana. If it was more so personal, if it was more so, on a lower level felony scale, misdemeanor scale, then that's where you're going to get the expungement. You're not going to get an expungement if you were caught with, 20 pounds of marijuana, took a plea deal and went upstate for that. Those type of cases may not get expunged, but definitely the lower level possessions and the lower level convictions, those will be expunged. So there will be expungement, but it's going to be discretionary, and it's going to be up to the people and those who are lobbying to determine how they're going to expunge those records of those involved with marijuana.
Okay. Can someone else speak to that? How do we feel about what's happening?
So I'll speak, and I will say that, I think that marijuana probably should have been decriminalized a while ago, just in comparison to the things that are legal. However, I do think that the reasoning behind legalizing marijuana now has a bit to do with money for certain people that still are not us. And if you kind of look at the places that have started, making their, like, the dispensaries and things like that, it cost a lot of money to open a dispensary. And getting people in our community to have that. I think the first Black dispensary was somewhere in California, and she said she had to sell everything. There's not a lot of us who are selling, so I also want to note that with legalization of things, there's going to be then a transfer in how we're getting it, and who gets paid for it, and like how all of that works. I do think that if you can, it would probably be better to buy from like a dispensary, since they have actual doses and milligrams. And you can, if we think about what happened with DMX and how, he became addicted to crack because he was smoking weed for the first time and somebody laced it. So you want to make sure that you're with someone who, with people that you trust, with somebody that monitors things like that, because people can sell you whatever they want. And so I just want everybody to be careful with that. I mean, I think that I don't think it should be criminalized, but now we have created a problem, most likely, where, now it's going to be a price war. And hopefully, I mean, people can stop. I guess that's it. And if somebody wants you addicted to something, they might put something like crack cocaine or lace it with something else that will have you coming back. And so just think about those types of things.
Just wanted to add to that, Hannah Gay. I know how you had asked, or not asked, but mentioned, I don't know anybody who was on weed and then went around and killed somebody or did this and that. Any time that happens, that weed that they had smoked is laced, and it's been laced with PCP.
And so for those that don't know what laced is, I learned this in college from Quana, right? When you're rolling, you have, I'm such a teacher, right? This is your paper, right? You put your weed or your grabbers or whatever it is on it, you lick it, and you literally roll it, right? So if you are not paying attention, when the weed is on the paper, they can sprinkle something else on it and roll it all together, and you would not know. Right? So that's the PCP, or that's in DMX's unfortunate case, I believe it was cocaine. So when your weed is laced, then you may run the risk of doing something that is non-traditional, unconventional. But if it's just weed alone, you're going to eat a burger and go to bed. Sorry, Hansi, you can continue.
No, that's pretty much what I wanted to say, because Joy had alluded to the fact that, DMX was introduced initially, and, anything that's in the street, you got to be careful dealing with anybody in the street. You don't know who's out to get you or to hook you. I mean, in all of the heroin overdoses, there's a significant amount of fentanyl laced in it, and that's what's killing people today. So I mean, you just got to be careful, man. People will put slip you a Mickey in your drink. People will roll things in your weed. I mean, it's just a matter of, this is how I feel, because marijuana, like I said, I had my time with it, and you got to be very careful. And when you're getting high and when you're doing it socially and with friends, it's easy to get caught up. You gotta be responsible in all that you do. You gotta be careful in all that you do, because you can make the choice to say, you know what, I'm gonna get high, and then before you know it, you're addicted. Before you know it, that's what's, you can't function without it. And then when you can't function without it, literally you're not functioning. So I mean, we have to be very, very gotta be able to pick and choose, make our decisions, make our choices. I made that decision back in 2002, and I've been sober since 2010. So I mean, it's just what it is. That's what it was for my life and how I feel about it. A lot more people are going to try it now because it's not criminalized in the personal realm. So wherever somebody's smoking a cigarette, if there's going to be a sign coming up next to, you can smoke here within a certain feet of a building, this and that, you're going to be able to smoke marijuana right there with the person who's smoking the Newport or smoking the Marlboro. So it's going to be commonplace. You're going to see it a lot more. You're going to smell it a lot more. People are going to be using it a lot more. And all it takes is to enter into a personal level for someone, and then before you know it, you don't know what that could be a snowball effect into something else for a certain individual. I'm not saying it's for everybody. Some people may be able to control it, but you're going to see a lot more issues coming out of this decision by the government.
So I do want to, because we kind of have examples of what has happened from other states, because we're not the first. I think we're 13th.
Right.
And I think what's getting it legalized in more places, and there are countries that never had it as illegal. What people are realizing is that it's not as terrible as, like, it's not as boogeyman as they tried to make it seem in the beginning. They didn't have an increase in crime and, things like that. So I do believe that I don't think it's going to be like everybody's just going to be smoking weed all of a sudden. And I also think that it kind of takes away the excitement of people who want to be like more criminals or who want to be bad. When you're a kid and you just want to do the thing that you're not supposed to do. So if it's not that I still don't think kids should use, but at the same time, the taking away the criminal thing also takes away from a lot of that type of attracting people who would want to be criminals. But I do have the concern about those who use it for self-treatment. And this is something that I wanted to make sure that I covered, because we, as a community, don't like to seek mental health help. And because of the way weed works, a lot of times it is used to cope or self-treat certain issues like anxiety, um, depression, depending on what you're using, stress. And if we don't deal with those issues, that is actually what will lead to the addiction. So we should not use this plant as an escape for something else, because we see that happen with alcohol. You see that when people are just like, oh, I'm too anxious, they will naturally treat with alcohol with no end to it. And then they may end up with a problem later on where it becomes that they need a crutch. And that was with the differences between THC and CBD. That's why THC is not like by itself addicting, but it makes your body not work how it's supposed to. THC actually replaces the natural chemicals that your body has to attach. So you want to make sure that you're still creating them, because then when you stop creating them, then you might need these endorphins. So when you're using it as a crutch, and not dealing with your issues, that's something that you have to try to avoid, because that's where the problem will lie. You have to deal with your issues. You have to let your body experience stress and figure out how to deal with stress, and so it can learn how to respond to it.
I just want to say I totally agree. Mental health in our community
I
is
think
so
that's
underrated.
a very important.
Wait, we got a delay.
Sorry, my computer was glitching. No, you finish talking. Sorry, my computer was glitching.
Oh, no, I was just saying, like, I wanted to point out, like, mental health in our community, like, it needs to be destigmatized, especially amongst our Black men. Like, I think there's more of an awakening with our Black women and wanting to be, more mentally aware. But I also think that, in general, Black women take on a lot of stress, and we are known to be the backbones of our community. So, especially when we have such a tolling and taxing label, we would be more inclined to make sure that our mental health is okay. And I think that we should also encourage our Black men to really tap in to do so, because at least from my experience, I see when I'm, like I'm talking to different people, and, I'm surprised at how many people want to just brush things under the rug and make it seem like it's part of the struggle.
Mm-hmm.
No, that's not how it works, right? I mean, so I just wanted to kudos for the mental health, because I'm big on mental health. Yeah, even with my high schoolers, I talk to them and check in with them every day, especially during these as they say, uncertain times.
I just wanted to jump in before we got too far. I believe Johans, that's how
Johanse. Mm-hmm.
Johanse mentioned soon it's going to be basically common area. I'm not sure of the exact date, but I have been trying to keep up with the different events and the updating of it. it is common area. Everywhere that you're allowed to smoke a cigarette, you are now allowed to have marijuana. You same as you can't smoke within the school zones and things like that, but you are allowed to now smoke marijuana wherever you are allowed to
Smoke a cigarette.
publicly smoke cigarettes.
Yep, yep. And by 2022 is not too far from now. We're pretty much entering into the 5th month of 2021. By 2022, they would have figured out licensing. They would have figured out the full way of how to tax, and dispensaries and what have you, and shops and other say restaurants that allow smoking. Some restaurants may allow smoking of marijuana as well. So this is really about to, like my sister and I talked about it. She said New York is about to be a cloud.
I don't know if we're gonna be a cloud. I mean, France is a cloud. I've been to Paris, and
Oh yeah,
boy, I don't know if they just stressed or what, right? But what I can say is I don't really like um, this this whole legalization. And I know this is gonna sound weird, but I know for me, it feels like it's not in our benefit. For example, before they made it official, I did look up like how much would it cost to get such a license. And honestly, it was like $200,000, and there's a $10,000 application fee. So I told my friends this. I said, how do they expect the average person who wants to become a business person in this area to actually do it? Do you think these little street corner seller people are going to be able to do so? No. So of course it's really for a specific demographic who
Boom.
can afford it. Or and if they can't afford it now, they have the credit to get the loan, or they have the lineage to tap in. We don't have that kind of finance. Therefore, it's not going to be built for us. It's not going to be in our favor. Now, I also heard that Governor Cuomo wanted to release an initiative for people of color and women, or some sort of incentive. And I was like, you know what? Let me know when there's more information about that. Because think about it, like we're talking about these dispensaries, and you're speaking of the first Black dispensary in California, and they're still fighting to have a dispensary of color in Boston. I don't even know if it even happened yet. And
So that
Boston, I want to say Boston has legalized it before us, and yet look at who owns those institutions.
that's exactly what I wanted to say, right? One, the mental health aspect, because ganja doesn't cause harm, has been commenting. Haven't had a chance to uh, respond to all of the comments or acknowledge all the comments. So I'm not ignoring you. I promise I'm here. But when Joy was speaking to mental health, a lot of times because people don't want to acknowledge what's going on, they look for escape routes, right? And because at some points marijuana was easily accessible, it became an escape route. We are not saying that marijuana is the problem. We are saying that the person manipulating marijuana because they don't want to deal with their crap is. Understand that everyone who smokes marijuana does not fall in that category. That is no different than eating, shopping, having sex, drinking, gossiping, lying, stealing. If you have a core issue that you don't want to address and deal with, whether it's mental, your character, and you're escaping it, you're going to find something to escape to. So instead of using drugs to self-medicate, if it's recreational because you like how it makes your body feel, that's fine. The problem is when you're using it to escape the trauma that you endured. At that moment, seek professional help so that you can get healthier tools to to address and deal with what's going on instead of turning to a drug to numb your feelings and then never deal with it at all. So that was what Joy was speaking to. I don't know if you're a sir or ma'am. My apologies. Right. So
Yeah,
that's
I'm
the first
sorry. I
thing.
didn't mean to. I'm glad you cleared that up because I didn't see the chat. But yeah, I'm not saying that that's what everyone uses it for. Definitely not. I was making sure that at the same
Right.
time that it gets legalized and that we're all using it, that we still acknowledge that we have a problem with not actually handling our mental health. And some people do use it for those reasons. So I'm sorry.
No. It is a misconception that a lot of people have, which is why we're having this discussion. We're clearing up the misconception. Everyone isn't picking up a blunt because they're escaping trauma. Some people are doing it because for them it's literally recreational, whereas for some people are using it for escape routes and for medicinal purposes. And it's not addressing the root issues if this individual has a root issue. So that's the first thing. And the second thing is speaking to what Sam said as far as um, who this industry really is for, right? When you understand that it costs $200,000 to start this business and $100,000 for licensing, that's $300,000. I don't know that many African Americans that have access to that capital. So it's very, very clear that the dispensary business is not for us. It's clear that the dispensary business is for the person that can make money off of our use. The problem is when it comes to the African American or the street corner hustler who's been doing this for 30 or 40 years, he's like, oh, great, now it's legal. Now I don't have to watch over my back. You realize that you need $300,000 to get your feet off the ground. Well, I don't have that capital. So do I continue selling it illegally and run the risk of not going the legal route, knowing that I don't have access to the capital to get it? And now the issue is you locked these individuals up for years. When you release them from prison, if you release them from prison, are you going to expunge their record? You now have to explain gaps in your work experience, right? So if you look at Central Park 5, it's probably one of the best examples that I can give. Right? When Central Park 5 was released and their record later expunged, they had 10 to 15 years of a gap that they have to explain to an employer. So even though the record is expunged, that gap still has to get explained. Then what? Are the dispensaries automatically hiring them as the chief operational officer? Because that's what you were doing on the street. You were the COO, the CEO, and the CFO of your block, of your territory. What are we doing so that they are, one, not constantly looking over their shoulder, but what security do they have when they are released from prison, if they're released from prison, so that they can return to some kind of normalcy in life?
I mean, luckily, weed isn't the only option. You know what I mean? I definitely understand what you're saying as far as like, you know, what are they going to do now? But I don't know how everybody else is, but I know if weed is something that took away 15, 20 years of my life, and I know I can live without it, I'll probably just do something else. If it's not like they can't do anything else. And I understand that those are people who should really benefit off of it. But we do know that it's not like, so like withdrawal from marijuana is not like a problem. You know, like it's not, people aren't in the hospital for stuff like that. So you can definitely just say, you know, let me get something else going. Let me do something else. But there is a lot of money to be made there. And that's why I feel like it's being legalized in the first place. But at the same time, as far as like the people who are being expunged or their records expunged, I mean, I don't know how the criminal system is going to deal with that.
You know what? Like, one of the other avenues is that, you know, again, when you get pulled over by the police, they use something like, oh, is that marijuana that I smell? I'm going to search your car. They use it as a way of finding something on you. Because chances are, yeah, they might not even smell it. Or maybe you were in an environment and some of the scent was on you. That doesn't mean that you used it. But now they have a way in to find a reason to lock you up. but it's so common. Again, the way there's so much in this justice system that is not in our favor, right? So that was a
Mhm.
leg in, and I also want to know, like, okay, without that leg in, like, are they going to still mistakenly use it as a leg in? And another thing that we have to consider that I think Johanse mentioned is that it's not legal on a federal level. So even if you have the business, are you allowed to have that money from sales in your federal bank account when it's not federally legal but state legal? And I think that's another loophole that people need to consider before they, act and open up that business, because that, like, again, if they do have this incentive for people of color and women to open up these businesses, and we make the mistake of putting our profits in that federal bank, is that a way of them saying that we have committed a federal crime? And again, I do believe that, they always look at us as we're guilty until proven innocent, unless you're unfortunately white, where you're innocent until proven guilty. Um, and however they can get you in, I mean, I don't know. I have so much to say about it. So until those things are like worked out, those are my biggest concerns. How is it that, the people who are disproportionately affected by the criminalization of marijuana, how are you going to alleviate some of that mistrust that was created? How are you going to allocate some opportunities? Because, like, they claim that they have all of these opportunities, and maybe they want to say bull crap like affirmative action or something like that. Not saying affirmative action is bull crap. What I'm saying is, like, they'll label it with one thing, but they won't act up on it. And then again, somehow we are still at the butt end of the stick. So until, like, there's real clarity, I don't really see that being for us.
What I wanted to mention, with respects to the ability for the police to have probable cause to search, um, with the marijuana now being legalized, if somebody is pulled over and marijuana is smell, they smell it in the air, they can still search. It just doesn't allow them to search the trunk and certain areas of the vehicle. It only allows you to search in the inner compartments of the vehicle. So they can't do a full search, only a certain type of search, because you got to understand is that if marijuana is being used, you're still going to be subject to search, because they want to now, because you got to remember, it's been placed by law in your possession. You can only have 3 ounces. So if you're smoking marijuana openly, you still could be subject to search, because you could be infringement of the law, because you may have 4 ounces on you, and you can be arrested for that. So, and have fines for that. So we got to be careful. Yeah, it's legal, but you got to stay within the confines of the law, as far as personal use, as far as, in your home, you're allowed up to 5 plants. So all of these things, are still put out there, because there's always going to be that somebody that's going to go above what is allowed to be legal. It's just what it is. Okay, alcohol is legal, but think about how many people drive under the influence, DUIs and DWIs. There's still prosecution out there once that law is broken. So, there's always going to be room to be found in the criminal justice system, even if something is legalized. When it comes to the dispensaries, the licenses have to be upheld. As you mentioned earlier, the pricing in that and the money that it takes to open up a dispensary. Also, you can sell out of you can have marijuana plants in your home. There's got to be a license that's going to be that has to be attained if you want to still deal locally out of your home. I don't know if they're going to even allow that, because you can't deal alcohol. So you're going to have to be able to, you're going to have some type of seller's license, just like you have to have a license to sell alcohol. And the age is still 21. So what if you're under 21, caught with this and that? I mean, there's so many ways that you still can be criminalized, even though this thing is legal. So we have to be careful and understand the intricacies and understand the details surrounding the legalization of marijuana, because you're going to have that individual that's just going to say, oh, legalized, boom, and then just start moving, and then not even realizing that they're still not upholding the law. So, you know, it's really a still a catch you situation. You just got to know how to maneuver within it. That's pretty much how it is. You know, what I'm seeing here, that there's still going to be issues with what's going on. See, here it is. Yes, in Yonkers, you can purchase a license to distribute. There it is.
But how much is the license? That's the question. I believe when I was speaking, it was before it became legalized, and I was speaking about obtaining a seller's license in general. So at the time, it was $210,000.
Yeah. That means
which for me is so discouraging, because you're making it very clear who you're pardoning to have this drug in the hand and who you're criminalizing for having this drug in your hand, right? That's when me as a woman of color, thank you so much, Yonkers Community Leaders Coalition. I appreciate you. That's when I, as a woman of color, as a sister, as a niece, as a daughter, as a friend, that's when I get angry, because we see all too often our men getting criminalized for something that now anyone can stop.
So I kind of do, I want to comment on that, because first, I do think it's still illegal to drive while smoking weed, right? Because the only thing that they actually did find correlation with being high on marijuana and like adverse effects was increase in motor vehicle accidents. So there is slowing of response times and things like that contribute to it. And so, I mean, with certain things, I think that regardless of what the law is, this is America, and America was not built for us. Period. The Constitution was never written for us. We're literally trying to change the Constitution so it works for us every single time. So anytime anything is a law or everything we do, we have to realize it's not for us. It's never been for us. We're trying to make it work for us, or at least so that we can, make a living and live comfortably. But even me, myself, I don't like to speed. I do speed, but I don't like to speed on the highway because I don't want any cop to have any reason to talk to me. Period. I don't like, my car's not going to smell like weed. And really, I've had cops search my car because I didn't signal a right turn at like 3 a.m. So at any given time, yeah, cops can search you. They're going to want to search you. You're automatically a criminal, like someone had said. I forgot who, but we're guilty until proven innocent. And so because we know this, and kind of just circling back to the use of marijuana, just be very careful. I don't care if it's legal or if it's not. You're still going to be a target until other things change about perceptions, because at the end of the day, that's what it is. And when they try to become more, understanding, because we saw what happened with heroin. You can't even, you can be high on heroin, and as long as you seek medical attention, they can't prosecute you for anything. And it is everyone's duty to save someone with a heroin overdose. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but there was a certain community affected by this opioid crisis. And so they will find a way, regardless of what they do with the laws. Everything can be legal for all I care. You make You make guns legal everywhere. It doesn't matter who has a gun. They're coming for us. You make guns illegal, they're coming for us. That's just how it's always worked with any sort of law or legislation. So, oh wow, okay.
Yeah, I believe. Thank you, Maddie. I believe what you mentioned is also what Kwana was also mentioning. But if anyone does
Mm-hmm.
cross the pricing of a license, do tell in the chat. I don't know if they actually like came up with another plan, but I know that those from the last time I heard the idea of, well, we're going to give some sort of aid to people of color and women. We're going to you know distribute, give out license to distribute, but the pricing of it and all that stuff, I wonder if that's updated um, more so for people who can actually um, so people can actually afford it. Like those prices are a bit ridiculous. Like the people who are known to be the sellers of marijuana now, I know that most of them won't be able to afford such a $210,000 bill. And then also $10,000 is like non-refundable. So if your application, that's what I was reading the whole thing. The application's like, oh, we're gonna reject you because it looks like you did a typo on your date of birth. You lose that $10,000. I don't have $10,000. That's like me. That's not a Benz, but maybe a Kia. That's like, I want to buy a Kia. I'm gonna just throw it out on a license application. Oh, let me go throw out another $10,000 for another Kia. Like, who has $10,000 just for an application fee? So I don't know.
No, I just get frustrated. Like this is me
And
not having like my professional hat on, but this is where I personally get frustrated because when you look at all of these clauses and you look at how it's made difficult, it's like, really? Okay.
yeah, and when I say people of color or black people, I do more so mean people of color. There's different racial groups that face different forms of oppression, and again, when I say something like, or when we say something like this, country wasn't made in our favor, it really was not made in the black favor. I mean, of all the groups, the enslaved people were the black people that were brought here. Maybe indentured servitude became enticing to other colored groups, but nonetheless, you know, we were heavily mistreated in America. So I'm not saying that other groups are not oppressed because they are. Just saying that there is a linkage to how the black person was oppressed, especially when you go back to the idea of the 3 for 5. How you that what are we doing? But I don't want to digress too much. But I'm just saying, so especially when it comes to something that is used higher in a community of color versus in other communities, the criminalization of it is going to be heavier. I mean, it goes into the idea of why were our people serving more time for crack, which is a cut down, cheaper version of cocaine than people who are using cocaine. And I'm not saying that those like one is better than the other and they're not going to cause neither of them are causing harm. They're both causing harm. But why, like, who created a scale to say, well, this one is not going to cause this much harm? Like, who did it? Did they get a professional doctor to
Mm-hmm.
come up with an equation to correlate the amount of damage done to the amount of years served? Or did they just throw it out to see, okay, this one is in this community more, so we can give them more years? Because that's kind of how it feels when you go back into your, like, I don't want to. I digress. I'm just saying, there's a lot of oppression, and especially when it comes to marijuana, and the fear and the you know there's just so much.
One
I,
thing,
I,
one thing that I see, that I wanted to mention is that, okay, it's legalized. Okay, you're gonna have the opportunity to be a distributor and be able to buy legally. But what about the individual that doesn't want to pay tax? So you're still gonna have the illegal distribution of marijuana. It's still gonna be criminalized because if there's sales illegally without a license, then you're still gonna have penal codes and
Mm-hmm.
prosecution surrounding that. You're still gonna There's still gonna be observatories, and there's still gonna be stings where they're gonna observe drug sales. I mean, it's just what it is. And then when you're dealing and selling to an undercover, and it's an illegal sale of marijuana, you're still gonna get a criminal sale of controlled substance in the third degree. You're still gonna get
That charge.
that B level nonviolent crime. It's still going to be there. So we have to understand that there's going to be always is going to be somebody going against the grain. Yeah, you're not going to be able to afford. Some people are not going to be able to afford licenses. Some people don't want a license. People don't want to pay the sales tax because if you're selling it, then you're going to have to prove your goods that have been sold. You're gonna have to prove that, and then you're gonna have to issue receipts, things of that nature. There's a lot
Mm-hmm.
involved in the taxation of alcohol and marijuana. There's this, like it said, it's industry that's gonna be created. So if there's industry, then there has to be paper trail. So if there's paper trail, then you're within the guidelines, you're within the law of being able to be your bank account is able to see that whatever you're distributing and whatever you're selling, it equates to through a receipt. So not everybody's going to be on that level. Not everybody's going to want to be on that level. So at that point in time, now we're going to have some federal charges coming down the pike because you're failing to pay taxes, you're evading, you're operating without license. So that's where we're going to get hit on the other end of the spectrum, because you're going to have those who still feel as if, you know what, I still got my connect, I'm still making my bread, I don't want them knowing what I'm doing. And that mentality is going to land you further underneath the jail. So we got to look out for that too. I mean, there's going to be so many angles in which we're still going to be hit, and so many angles in which it's going to be detrimental to us moving forward.
So there's a question that I want to ask, and it will be my last question. And then if anyone has any questions, you can feel prepared or get prepared to put them together and drop them in the chat. We talked a lot about smoking weed, right? What it is, what marijuana is, how it affects the body, the different strains, how the law passing actually affects us, right? But I'm not a smoker, right? My brain logically could never process smoking. Um, for two main reasons. One, I'm a singer, right? And the last thing you need is to damage your cords in your lungs because that's what we use. That's my instrument. And two, in a fire, we're told to get away from smoke. So my brain, and Quana knows me, probably has known me the longest here. Quana knows I'm very logical and very literal. So if you tell me to stay away from smoke, Quana will leave the room when she has to smoke because Hannah, her sister friend, does not process smoke in my body. So for someone like me, or for someone who's just uncomfortable with the idea of smoking, now that it has been made legal, what are some alternate ways to ingest marijuana? Right? Like I'm the person that will draw a cup of tea
I'll
and
get
drink the tea,
Oh, there's
right? So what
definitely
are
tea.
other non-conventional ways?
I'll
There's
jump
oil.
in.
Oh,
I'm
go ahead.
actually excited. There are many ways.
at this point, anything that you can think of that is edible is now able to be infused. We had that conversation about THC and CBD and things like that, or whatever the case may be. Anything, and when I say the broad spectrum, using the word anything with that communications degree, I mean anything that is deemed edible now can be infused. If you like it, they can make it. I literally, Hannah, and you know, we talk about this literal thing. I literally looked for a vendor for 2 years. 2 years. I went to an event where I had popcorn. I looked for this vendor for 2 years. Maybe, I want to give it approximately 3 months ago, I
You
stumbled
found them?
upon this vendor again.
Yay!
I have been ordering nonstop from Kitchen 42. Nonstop. Kitchen 42. While we were in the car, I don't know if the drink was in the photo, but that is called a hybrid. It is the best thing in the world to me. It's a lemonade and iced tea half and half infused drink. K42 on Instagram. You can infuse anything. Weekly they have new specials. This month for 420 they had K42 bundles. They also had a vegan menu. They this is what I'm saying to you. When I say anything, I mean anything. They had a entire vegan menu. Every week there's something new, from puddings to drinks to cakes. So when you ask, what can you have? I've been to Jamaica, your home. You know it's everybody's home, where you can visit and have you tea and your biscuits and your trinkets, your coffee, however you like it, whatever is in your. You don't even have to eat it if you don't want to. You got arthritis, they got creams. You could rub it on you. You like lotions. It's expanding. It's more than just sitting down and smoking a blunt or smoking a joint. You could never see yourself doing that, which is understandable. But if we decided that we was going to have a tea party and I decided not to tell you, which I would never do because it's a respect aspect, the same as I would get up and exit the room, I would tell you. And when you made that decision, you would never know. It's not like it's something that you would taste. It's not like it would be different. You would look for it. And that is what would excite you even more. Like, I've been to restaurants and things where they cater to the infused world. And it's like, so you want me to believe that this baked macaroni and cheese that got 6 cheeses also is infused with marijuana. So I'm not need the edibles because I'm eating the edibles at the same time that I'm consuming hot. This is fun. It's
I think that's where people get sorry. I think that's where people get tricky because they feel like the only way to ingest it is by smoking. They don't realize that, like you said, things have expanded and there are alternate ways to ingest marijuana. Joy?
Yeah, so I'm agreed. There's they can basically make it into anything. Just want us all to be careful though, because marijuana works differently when it's ingested versus when it's smoked. The high lasts a very long time, and it actually takes longer for you to feel high. So people accidentally sometimes take more than they need because they're not getting the same high that they got when they were smoking. And then the other aspect is because they're making it in sweets and brownies and gummy bears, there has been an issue with children. So my cousin actually just finished her residency at University of Colorado, and she was telling me about one time where there was a kid who was just out. This kid was admitted to the hospital. They didn't know what happened to her. And they're running all these tests, and then the parents come back and they're like, oh my goodness, she ate the entire bag of gummies. And what we've already discussed is we have seen effects when people ingest THC as children and how it can affect them later on in life. I believe that child was okay. I actually don't remember following up, but when you have things that are geared towards children, which is why a lot of people had the problem with electronic cigarettes, because you're making them like bubble gum, and so like a lot of these kids are like, oh, grapes and all that cherries, and so it makes it look more like it's geared for kids. Just make sure that you're very careful if you do happen to use them, and also know how your body works. So I don't know what that sound is. Is that me? Is there like
I believe so. While you're talking, I only hear it while you're talking, so it might just be the sound of the speakers.
Okay, it must be. Sorry, but
Okay.
I believe there's I forgot what I was just about to say.
You're speaking
Your
about
body responds to it differently.
and the body, like knowing your body.
Oh, yes. So marijuana gets distributed into fat tissues and then just seeps out over time, and especially when it's ingested. So it may differ based on the amount of fat content that you have in your body. And people who consistently smoke, what happens is smoke or use marijuana at all, they constantly have the same, like the THC actually just releasing from their muscle tissues. And so a lot of times they can sustain a high longer, or they're not as affected by the edibles as someone else. So if you're eating an edible for the first time or smoking for the first time, and you're with somebody who's been doing it for 5 years, it probably will be a problem for you if you do exactly what they do. Don't do as they do. But then also be careful, because like you said, you could tell Hannah that you weren't putting anything in anything. So people can get you some brownies, and that's how like Special K was put into people's drinks at some point. I'm not saying that it's going to be used as like a date rape drug, but I'm just saying if you don't want to use marijuana, and if you want to stay away from it, make sure that you know your friends.
Which is funny, because even when in like college settings, and we'll wrap up soon, even when in college settings, Quana was always like the protector. Never mind the fact that Quana is younger than me. Quana always be like, hold on a second, let me taste what's in that cup before you drink it, because I need to make sure that y'all didn't drop nothing in here, because Hannah doesn't drink, Hannah don't smoke. So we got to make sure that this thing is safe.
But would you know? Because you're just
know? No.
Oh, you're saying you're gonna
Quana would drink before I would drink, to make sure. So if we went to the bar and I got a drink, even if we were at the bar, Quana would snatch it and sip it before I could, to make sure, because she knows what to look for. I would not know what to look for.
Yeah, a lot of times you can't look for anything.
Right. So just the speaking to knowing who's in your camp and knowing who's around you and knowing who can protect you.
And then that just goes back to, like I said, with her, with the tea thing. Like I said, it would be just in the respect aspect of making sure that is something that, even though I know she indulges in tea, I know she doesn't indulge. So to who's to say that although she's not physically smoking, that's something, it still may not be something that she ever wants to partake. Whether it's edible, whether it's direct, or whatever the case may be. But as you were saying, Joy, it definitely is about a safety aspect. You definitely have to know your circle. You definitely have to know who you are going to. Like I mentioned with the Kitchen 42, I searched for them for 2 years. In the time that I've been with them, I have to respect their delivery. In every delivery that I get, they make sure they let you know everybody is different. Make sure you're on a full stomach. Make sure you only have half of whatever it is you purchased. Make sure you give yourself time, 30 minutes to an hour, to see how you react before you decide. All of their products literally have a stop sign on it that says not for children. These are people that want you to enjoy yourself, but want to also keep people safe. You have to respect that. Even if that's not your choice, if you don't indulge, how can you not respect someone who wants to indulge, but also respect the ones who choose not to?
Yeah, no, I definitely get it. So just making sure, because I mean, because a lot of times those labels are there because they have to be, right? And in order for you to keep your license, in order for them to sell cigarettes, it has to say Surgeon General's warning. People die. Like, so so yes, they're gonna tell you everything. They also are not allowed to make medicinal claims. They can't tell you that it actually treats a thing if it's not an approved FDA approved indication. So there's always a different aspect. I would say that if you're using cannabis for something like something like localized pain, I would suggest the topicals because it does not absorb into the blood-brain barrier. It's not psychoactive, and there are proven benefits for that.
Yeah, I agree. I've actually gotten some rub for my mom. She does have chronic pain from a condition, so we've actually gotten some rub, and she expressed that it worked better than what was being prescribed to her. So every opportunity we get, we'll get some rub for her. But I also wanted to mention, like, even on Netflix, there's a cooking show about people cooking with like
Yes.
marijuana. So as long as you can extract the oil or some sort of like people make it into butter, you can pretty much make it into anything. So just doubling back that you want to make sure that if you're the one making the food, be clear to your audience, and also vice versa. Make sure that these whoever's serving it to you, and then just it's true. Like, edibles is not for me. However, if someone does ask me to make it, I will make it for them. But again, if I'm doing something like that, like, they know what to expect because this is what they asked for. However, I know that it's just not for me. So for how it interacts with me, I'm like, nah, it does last a while. So for me, it feels like when you consume it, in my opinion, for me, is a little bit more of like I don't have control over it because like, you can't really time how it's gonna like disperse in your body. It's almost like, when you take the pills, and sometimes it can last 4 hours, sometimes it can last 6. Well, it's kind of the same idea. When it's hitting the bloodstream and then just circulating through, it can last a while. So for me, consuming is not the way. If I do want to partake, it would be more of a inhalation where I know the time response. So again, for me, it's more about making sure that I have still control. I think the idea of losing control is where it becomes dangerous. And again, as you guys mentioned, there's different reasons for why someone or an individual can lose control, and they should tap into that.
Ooh. This conversation has been super informative. Thank you to the panelists that were here and that could pop in and out, for contributing, for sharing your experience, your knowledge, your field of education, your expertise. I'm super duper duper grateful. I'm not seeing any questions. And so I'm going to end the broadcast. I'm just going to ask for you guys to stay on for like 2 minutes just so that I can check in with you. But yes, thank you so much for those that were able to hang out. Once it goes live, feel free to share it, encourage your friends, not just to partake recreationally, but to make sure that they're making the best decision for them and their bodies, to respect other decisions. But if you learn nothing else, do your research and do your homework, right? Understand what's happening to your body, how it's affecting your body, the importance of marijuana from a medical perspective, as well as from a recreational perspective. And above all else, just have fun and be amazing humans and go love on somebody. All right. Have a blessed and safe evening. Bye.
Many blessings.